I have a friend call me out of nowhere. He's like, hey, I just got tapped to write a Verizon commercial. I wrote a bunch of car scenes in it. Can you drive? I was like, well, answer yes, yes. But I was just thinking, oh my God.
That's stunt driver Bet Heykoop. I'm Cara Duffy, and this is the Powerful Ladies Podcast. Let's jump in. Let's tell everybody who you are, where you are in the world, and what you're up to.
Yeah, so I'm Bet Heykoop. I'm a newly minted stunt driver trying to figure out her way around this very male-dominated space in Los Angeles.
How did you become a stunt driver?
Oh my God. Okay, so I wanted to do it since I was a kid. I watched the movie The Italian Job. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Okay.
It's why I bought a Mini Cooper. Mm-hmm.
Oh, she has a Mini.
I used to. When I lived in Europe, I did, because I thought I had to after watching The Italian Job.
You did. You were obligated to do that. So yeah, I watched that. I thought that what they were doing with cars was really cool. Didn't think it was a job, had no idea it was a job, but just knew I wanted to do that. And as I got a little bit older, I'd bought myself my first car. And I was like, well, I'll just teach myself how to stunt drive. So I'm going to go out behind the Walmart and spin around and see what happens, just pull my e-brake. And one day I came home and my dad was like, your tires are bald. Like, what happened? And I was like, nothing happened. I'm fine. Nothing happened at all. And so when I replaced the tires, I quickly realized that I couldn't afford the car payment and the tires. So I promised myself, when I'm older and I have more money, I will get trained to be a stunt driver. Then life happens, right? I got married. I had a job. I worked in tech. And there was this moment where it was just having that office job, even though it was great, very financially stable, I was just this isn't for me. It's eating away at me. I almost didn't recognize myself anymore. And so I left that job. I became a certified herbalist because I decided to just pack everything in between me and pursuing my dream. And through COVID, I did this one book called The Artist's Way. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Very familiar. Yep. I have a copy behind me. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Very good. Keep it close. It's really, it was that shit is tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going through that book is really hard. But something that really came out of that was I was able to talk to my inner critic, and I named her Annabelle, and she's a huge bitch. So she's a little quieter now. She just needed some love and attention. But I was able to really kind of identify what was holding me back. And the question came up of, if you came back to this life in any form, what would that form be? And I always had stunt driver listed. So it took me a while to actually admit it to myself, because I thought, right, I'm 30. I'm not working my cushy job in tech anymore. And the only thing I can think about is being a stunt driver. It consumed me. And it took me a while before I even could admit it to my husband. And it was he knew before I did. He was like, of course, this is what you must do. So having his support was amazing. And then, a few more months of denying it and going into the dark places of myself, and then realizing, you know what, I'm nothing to lose. If I live in Los Angeles, there's a place to go get trained out in the desert where everyone goes,
mm-hmm.
actors, stunt people, if they need to train. So it's a very serious school. And I said, okay, right, I'm going to go. If this isn't for me, then I won't go back, or I won't pursue this further. And there's something that happened when I was in the car. I even feel it now thinking about it. We were doing this there was 12 cars, I think, in this chase scene that we were simulating. It was all this
How cool.
Oh, it was so cool. It was so cool. And it was this really cool chase scene. And I was laughing and crying,
mm-hmm.
because I was so happy. And there's like this thing that happens in my brain. I dabbled in some like stock car racing before to kind of just like, like one day experiences, nothing crazy, but there's something about like driving towards a wall at 120 miles an hour and being able to manipulate the car and like do what I needed to do to make it back around the track. Like I crawled out of that car and I was so calm, and other people were like shaking from adrenaline. And I'm like, well, my brain's broken. This is, this is the obvious answer, but it wasn't. I just found something that I really, really enjoyed. And so, after, I guess, training, I was just like, hey, I know no one and nothing. And then that kind of started me on the path that I'm on now of just, for lack of a better word, manifesting heavily all the things that have happened in the past year.
What are some of those things that you've been able to manifest?
Oh my God. So, well, everything's a story with me. So here's the story. I didn't know anyone or anything about this space, right? I'm like, I've just turned up to this class and realized it made me extremely happy, and I wanted to do more of it. So I knew that I needed a practice car. So I thought, okay, let me just go in my backyard with my notebook and like write down the things that I need in a practice car, like having no frame of reference. Like I had frame of reference for my class, but just, I was like, well, all I have right now is my imagination. So I'm going to go live in my imagination in the morning every day. And so I started writing that specs down for the car. And 3 days later, I find that car on Craigslist, and I convinced the guy to sell it to me for $800. And now this car is like, it is like the perfect car because it's a Crown Victoria. Those actually are quite expensive. If you want to use them for like stunt schools, and other people in stunts desperately try to find this car. And they usually sell for like $3 to $5 grand at least. And so I drove my ass down to Long Beach and picked up my stunt car. And I had my friends paint it for my birthday. And I like had painted this little miniature version yesterday of it. This is like this like rainbow, crazy little car. I have her here with me, but yeah, I found that car, and then I kept imagining while I was sitting in my backyard. I just kind of let my imagination go, and I just kept seeing myself, thinking about the people I wanted to be around, like their kind of energy and what it would feel like to be on set, to really get myself, hopefully used to it, right? Because again, it's me alone in my backyard. And I kept seeing myself on set, and I kept seeing commercial or music video by the end of the year. Because this was a big practice for me, and actually writing down what I wanted. I was always so scared to actually say what I wanted. And even though at the time I felt really just kind of, who the fuck am I? Like, I'm just pulling this out of my ass, like what am I supposed to do with this information? Like, that's coming from my own brain. But I took it seriously, and I wrote it down, and I almost, really convinced myself that this is what I wanted. It was already coming out of me. And so commercial music video by the end of the year, it got towards the end of the year, and I thought, right, maybe this is teaching me that this isn't going to happen this year, but to be patient, and, something like this will happen. I'll be damned if, like, 1 week into December, I have a friend call me out of nowhere. He's like, hey, I just got tapped to write a Verizon commercial. I wrote a bunch of car scenes in it. Can you drive? I was like, well, answer yes. But I was just thinking, oh my God, like, I was thinking just like any type of commercial. I don't know, like I was thinking a car commercial, anything like that. And another friend reached out and was like, hey, I'm going to shoot a music video. Can you drive in this music video for me? And so my lesson there was, it's not a commercial or a music video. I have to say and more, because it was a commercial and a music video by the end of the year. And that was so incredible to me. And there was one moment where, when I was I was driving this like huge van in the Verizon commercial, and I saw the camera behind me move in a certain way in my rearview mirror. And I thought I had this crazy deja vu moment where I was like, I saw this in my backyard. Like I saw this moment in my backyard like 4 or 5 months ago. Um, and so I don't know, I just had this really awesome kind of moment of, oh, anything I imagine is like real. Like I can make it real. And so I like have it on a ring now. Like anything I can imagine is real. And it's been a cool kind of journey of really leaning into like trusting whatever that intuition is pulling me towards, even if it's not conventional. And finding there's so many other things, but those are like kind of like the first moments of like me being like, oh, the call is coming from inside the house. Like, oh boy. Oh bother. I should listen to that, you know?
How is that different than how you were living life before?
Oh, oh my God. What a great question. I think how I was living before was doing everything that everyone else told me I needed to do or I should do, and losing a lot of my own voice in that. I will say I didn't feel like I even had an intuition for, okay, let me rephrase that. I had an intuition. I just I was so far disconnected from it that I just was tossed around with whatever energy people had around me. I was such a people pleaser. It made me really good at recruiting because I could like figure out what people needed and wanted, which is what I did with engineers and recruiting and tech. But it was something that, God, even thinking of it now, it's like cutting myself off, I think, from that core intuition. Like it's almost like you cut a vine, it like withers and dies, right? So I think just the I don't know, being so anxious and so, looking outward to see what I should do next as opposed to looking inward. If that makes sense.
It makes total sense.
I see
Now
all your books are rainbow.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool.
It's so funny. I used to organize them by like category and have them alphabetized or something, but gosh, maybe 8 years ago I switched to the color coding, and it's so strange now. Someone says a book and I'm like, white cover, blue cover. Like I now know books based on that.
Oh my God, no, my apps are color coded in my phone.
Yeah.
Like I color code them. So I'm like, right, Instagram, kind of purpley. Oh, that's in purple.
Yeah.
It's really funny.
Yeah, it's like, and it's so good. Like our brains like that. They like color cues. So because there's so much other content in our lives that are word and text based. So when we don't need to use that, it's nice.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So you've thought about being a stunt driver for a long time, but I'm curious, if we go back to 8-year-old you, was she like stunt driver?
Oh my God. 8-year-old me. Oh, she's so sweet. 8-year-old me. She wouldn't be opposed to the idea, but I don't think she knew what that was yet.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I think like she had all the makings to, I think, like really, really like bite into a non-traditional kind of like life and existence. And I think a lot of those things were happening then as well. Like, I mean, my dolls were like my friends. I was like, I don't necessarily, I was thinking like, these aren't my babies. I don't know that I want babies. Like, these are my friends. I like that. Like, I was really kind of like able to like delineate myself in that. And it was kind of, honestly, it's really funny that you asked about that age. Cause eight's my favorite number and it always has been. And I think it was kind of around that time where I started to get ingrained with like, this is the way you're supposed to live life, not how you are as an 8-year-old exploring and being yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of age and time was really when I was living a little bit more loudly in like what I did and how I dressed and how I would like joke around, and I was really kind of like finding my edges.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was that at that range where things started to get a little reined in.
Yeah.
So then when, I see Italian Job when I'm like, I don't know, I think I was like 13. I was able to see what I wanted, but I put it away,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
I think a lot of women are in a space where they want that deeper connection with their intuition, and they want that deeper connection with who they just really are. Like that pushing the edges 8-year-olds, like, let's just be fully self-expressed as us person. And you mentioned doing, going out in the backyard every morning to get reconnected and to just imagine things. But when did you decide that you needed to start putting practices in place to help get there? And what were those practices that you started with?
Oh my God. You just asked such great questions.
Thank you.
You take me to such key places. It's amazing. Um, I think honestly, the first thing I thought about was, and this is, I don't know, this isn't really that random, but the first thing I thought about was, how do I make that little kid version of me happy? And
Mm-hmm.
like everything I do now, like if I'm practicing in my stunt car, I like imagine her in my front seat with me. I'm like, you good? And she's like, yeah. Like, so I mean, aside from lots and lots of therapy, which I started and continued with at that time, and I still do. Um, I think, I mean, initially it was being able to actually like get clear on what I wanted and write that down. Um, and then, I mean, my husband told me this. I was terrified to put myself out there. I was terrified
Mm-hmm.
to even post on Instagram. Like I literally only started posting this past summer, like things that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Um, and he was like, no one else is going to believe you if you don't. So like, let the practice of showing yourself, just posting on Instagram, which would create great panic in me, but I created a habit around that to like
Mm-hmm.
really be able to start putting myself out there. Even if it feels terrifying, like it's my way of proving to me that this is what I do. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to now be like, oh yes, visually looking at the things that I'm doing is really, really helpful to me to see like, oh, I can do a 360. I can do this 180. Like I am this person. Um, and so I think for me, kind of being able to visually represent what I'm doing because what I'm doing can be visually represented was such an important like first step. Did it feel great? Absolutely not. But I think there's like a difference between doing something that is like wrong, but you do it anyway, like wrong for
Mm-hmm.
you, not, yeah, wrong like for you and like the core of who you are. And then doing something that is uncomfortable because you are growing
Yeah.
and it's creating new growth. And so I leaned into that a little bit more.
I think that's an area where a lot of people stop is you want something and you want it, and then you take the first step and you're like, that's not comfortable. And
Correct.
and there's like this retreat element, and like there's so much humor and confidence building and all of the things by stepping into that uncomfortable space. It's become something where I'm like, I've been comfortable a lot this month. I got to go do something uncomfortable because
That's cool.
it shifts. Like you can't, it's the only way that I know people can build confidence is doing things that make you uncomfortable or where you're a novice, because
Yeah.
you can't, you have to earn the confidence with yourself, not other people.
That is so well put. Like that makes so much sense. Like couldn't have said it better. That is so awesome. Like I'm instantly thinking now like about, okay, so I teach people stick how to drive manual cars. And in like North America,
No one
that's
does.
not a thing, right?
It's
But
embarrassing.
mostly it's men who know how to do it, right? And then they teach like brothers and uncles and whatever, and not like female or people who are queer, like in their family, right? So as I'm finding myself in more car spaces, I would see like this group of people physically on the outskirts, like they'd be there, but if you don't look like everybody else, like you
Mhm.
get fucking grilled. It's like, why are you here? Is this your dad's car? You know? So I would go up to them and be like, hey, like, what's going on? Why are you here? And there's always this hesitation of like, I love cars, but like, I don't know how to build engines, or I can't drive
Yeah.
stick. And so I got this so many times, and I started asking my friends, like, do you guys know how to drive stick? And there's so many like crazy stories that come out. It's like, yeah, well, I got taught once, but they told me I wasn't teachable, or I got left on this hill and they walked home and I had to figure it out. It was like all these like brutal moments of like
Mhm.
trauma. And I thought, okay, I have a vintage car. I had just learned to drive stick not long before that. I'm like, I'll teach you. Like, let's go. And so having someone in the car doing something that they're so like, it's so outside the realm of what they're used to doing, and it's so uncomfortable, but like they allow themselves to be really bad at something for a
Yeah.
minute, and then you start to learn. It's like it's so uncomfortable because it's so
Mhm.
outside of your comfort zone. But for anyone who I'm teaching, they like want to be taught. So it's like, they're
No
there because they
prisoners.
no. I'm like, do not do. I won't teach you if you are really don't want to do this. But there's such a sense of empowerment after. Like everyone's just like,
Mhm.
I am so hot. Like I can drive stick now. This is amazing. But it's getting through that period of like
Mhm.
discomfort to get there,
Yeah.
you know? And I started just recording this because I thought it was so wild to like see this kind of progression. And so
Mhm.
I call it I now I call it Hot Shift, my show.
I love that.
And so we have all these moments of like the first time they killed the engine, I'm like, you killed it. When was the last time you killed it at something? You know, so it's like
Yeah.
part conversation, but part like you're having this moment of like, okay, I'm learning something new. This is terrifying. I'm driving a car around the street. Like, what's happening? But the confidence that can come out of that after is just like chef's kiss.
And I'm the person who never gets the chance to drive sticks. Like a friend and I drove up to LA recently, and he is a stick shift Subaru, and I was like, we got out of the car. I'm like, would you ever let me drive that? Because I miss that feeling, that go-karty feeling.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he's like, yeah, you can drive it one day. I'm like, okay, thanks.
That's amazing. Did one day happen?
Not yet, not yet. I'll give him some shit this
Girl,
week to make sure that
come
happens
drive my
sooner.
car.
Well, then I'm like, my thought was like, I don't want to drive it around a neighborhood because you can't enjoy a stick when you're like stopping every 5 seconds. So I'm like, where can I take it? I'm like, would the highway be enough? Do I want to go somewhere else with this car?
Yes.
But I
I
think
have a
a
good
little
starting
highway.
place.
Oh.
I'll tell you. I have a
Perfect. I
great
love
starting
that.
place. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a long time, like one of my best friends from college, she also knows how to drive stick. And that was the first car I had, or I guess technically second, but first car that was like mine and not a family hand-me-down.
Yeah.
And we used to be like, I don't know if we can date guys that don't know how to drive stick because it's weird. No.
That is so awesome. I had this
Yeah.
whole conversation with the first person I taught, and she is queer, and we had this whole conversation around like gender and driving.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she's like, well, like if I'm like with a guy, I kind of want him to drive, but then if I'm with a woman or a different person, like I want to drive. And it was just such a cool conversation to be like, well, now she knows how to drive sticks and now she always wants to drive, you know?
Yes.
But it was such a cool, like, I don't know, the cool thing that comes out of it because we're so coded, you know, and
Hmm.
like guys drive cars and that's it. And, you know, I don't know, it's been a really interesting kind of journey leaning into it being myself fully in it. Um, that was a tangent. Sorry.
No, but I think it's a really important thing to talk about because there have been so many situations where I've been the passenger, and especially I'm from the Northeast, so there's been like snow, and I'm like, stop the car, get out, you're making me crazy. we do not need to go 5 miles an hour. It is just snow.
Yeah.
And like realizing like this person has no snow experience, and it's like, you're like, we do not need to go this slow. You're gonna like, I'm gonna lose my mind driving this slow as a passenger. And then similarly, I was living in Germany, and a bunch of us went skiing, and I took my Mini Cooper, and the guy I was dating at the time had this BMW, and he's like, "Oh, I can't take my car. It's like rear wheel drive." And I'm like, "So is mine, but like we can get up the hill. Like I'll drive."
Yeah.
And it's like, "What?" And I didn't judge either of these men for these situations, but there was a moment where I'm like, it's so weird that like you don't have power in this space and I do, and society tells me that you should. And it
Yeah.
was a really interesting moment of being present to like, this is not normal. Okay.
Right. You're like, oh,
hmm
there's a glitch in the simulation. I see it.
hmm
What's
And
happening
props to
here?
my dad for making sure that I knew how to drive stick.
Yeah. Oh,
You
that's
don't want me
amazing.
doing anything else in the car besides taking it to a car wash, but
Yeah.
I can drive us. That's not the problem.
You can, yep, you can go get some coffee.
Yeah.
You can run your errands. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'd be good in a getaway, but you don't want me to fix it, change the
Oh,
oil, none of those things. Mm-mm.
yeah. Yeah. Don't need it. Don't need to do
No.
that.
So when you're doing the stunt work and you're racing, you're chasing after that wall or making these turns, because obviously a lot of stunt work I think people assume is very exciting. And often stunt work is like, nope, I'm just here because I'm
Lots of
qualified and I'm
waiting.
safe.
Hmm.
And a lot of waiting and like, ooh, stunt driver, we're going 25 miles an hour so you can catch the scene. Ooh, right? So it's not
Yeah.
always, shooting the Italian job and driving a car.
Right.
But when you do have those moments where you get to be the epitome of what a stunt driver is, how do you feel?
Oh my God. For once, I feel just like I am where I belong. Um, I feel like fully at peace. And look, there's many more things that I want to do with stunt driving, and I know them and I can see them now for myself. And we all know that was hard to get to. Um, but I think like I just feel like, oh, this is where I've meant to be here. Like I
Mhm.
think even on the first job that I'd had, on that commercial, I remember getting there and seeing the car that was going to shoot me, and it's like this, it's called like a moto crane or like Russian arm. It's basically this crane with a camera on it that's on top of typically an SUV. And I thought it would be years until I'd be able to like work with one of those because they cost a lot of money to have on set. And so I was like, oh, not only am I shooting while I'm driving a car, but I'm shooting like with this car following me. I'm following that car. Like, this is like the real fucking deal of stunt driving. and, and I wasn't nervous at all. I was like so just happy and chill and in my element. And I feel so like, yeah, I just felt so grateful to be able to like kind of taste what that is. And I want more of it. Like being a stunt driver isn't like, oh, I'm working constantly or all the time, especially if you have like people are like, who are you?
Yeah.
What are your connections? Um, but having moments, I feel so grateful to be able to have had moments where I've felt that and felt that in the car.
hmm
Um, yeah, that's such a good question too. Thanks for asking that.
Well, I think it brings up how important it is to have that level 10 moment.
Yeah,
So many people, besides people not being uncomfortable, there's also all of these people who we all have dreams. We all have these things we want. And so few people are chasing after them in such a way where they get a 10-day, they get a
yeah,
10-second, minute, 5 minutes. But once you have that moment, you can't unhave it. You can't go back.
yeah,
And I think it shifts how you view yourself and what's possible. And I mean, you have a ring now, right? To remind yourself that like,
yeah,
this actually happened. I didn't imagine it. It's why I have one of my tattoos. Like when I was moving back from Europe, I'm like, I need to remember that this wasn't a dream I had. Like this actually happened. And
wow,
it's so easy to like have that moment and then get sucked back right into like dishes, laundry, blah, blah, blah. But we need to remember like, no. Like we can do such cooler things if we keep remembering and kind of going after it.
Yeah. Why were you in Germany?
I was working for Puma. So I was there for 4 years
Awesome.
at their kind of global headquarters, actually running the motorsports footwear division. Yeah.
Oh my God. If only our
Yeah.
paths had crossed. If I had followed my dreams sooner.
Right? Yeah. I mean, it worked. It was really amazing. I've had the pleasure of, making the performance product for a MotoGP and Formula One, as well as all the lifestyle pieces and getting to go to the Ferrari factory and museum and Ducati. So the only thing I didn't get to do when I was there, which is like, I'm so sad about it, was go to a Formula One race as like part of that side of things. Like obviously I can just go get a ticket and go, but to be on the kind of team side would have been really cool to see it that way. And maybe I could pull some strings and still make it happen.
Oh,
But
you gotta do it.
yeah, it was really fun and really interesting we had a lot of women on the team who were working on it. And there's actually a lot of women in the Ferrari and Ducati organizations as well. So there are women in places of motorsports and have always been, but it's definitely not, we were never the majority, let alone it was never equal.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, navigating that while you were there, you're in a different culture completely because you said you grew up in the Northeast, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're in a completely different culture. At least from a gender perspective, you're like outnumbered. Like, how did you kind of find your voice in that space?
It was really interesting because I think when I look at what I was up against kind of in that space, I didn't speak the language of the country I was now living and working in. I was young. I was female. And then add on whatever category I was working in at the time, and it added whatever other dynamic to it. There were definitely like fellow employees or people on my team that I really had to be fierce or bold with and just like not tolerate some of it. There's a guy who was mad that I was American, younger than him and female and telling him what to do. And I'm like, this is so ridiculous. Most people weren't like that though. I had really amazing teams and leadership there. And most of the men I worked with, like, they just wanted someone who got shit done. And I always have. And they were really fun. And some of them I'm really close with still, and they're family at this point.
Yeah.
I learned Italian before I was learning German because my team was a lot of Italian. So they were really inclusive and wonderful. But, I think that I had to consciously walk through and like remind myself that whatever was in my head about not knowing enough and not having this in-depth motorsports background before I managed the category. Like I wasn't there for my motorsports knowledge. I was there for my knowledge of making product and shoes and going to market and telling stories. So if I could just listen and absorb all I could about the motorsport story that they wanted to tell and find those details, like that I'm good at. So that's why I can kind of jump into any product, business, whatever, and be like, okay, here's what we need. But I had to keep reminding myself that I wasn't there to be the Formula One expert.
Right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have called Puma, and then they definitely wouldn't have called me because they were calling us for our product knowledge and making them lots of money through products. So that I had to remember that we could do. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's so awesome. Like focusing in on like, this is the reason why I'm here. And these are my strengths. And I think like kind of that really just like, as I'm looking at the car space in general, I think that's a really cool thing to hold on to because there's such value also showing up as yourself fully in whatever space, whether or not on paper you air quotes to someone else belong there.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really cool that you did that. You're like, hey, no, like this is my value. This is why I'm here.
And it was hard, right? Just like you've experienced. Some days you're like, you get overwhelmed by the like, do I belong at this table? And then other days you're like, for me, like, I know there's always a tipping point when I start getting frustrated and I'm like, stop, move, no, I'll fix it, stop. And that's when I know I'm like, okay, not only do I belong here, like this table might be too small now.
Yeah.
But
Oh, yes.
it's like a repeat thing though, right? Like there's always the next level. And now I'm looking for what's a fun category I haven't worked in, because then I get to learn something. Otherwise, it's I'll be bored, which I've learned about myself
Yeah.
too, which I'm sure you have a little bit of that trait yourself based on the fact that you're fearlessly jumping into new things.
Oh my God. Yep. No, I totally feel that. And I think like the more you can do that, the more it becomes like a practice.
Mm-hmm.
Because even initially, like pursuing this, Annabelle, that voice in my head, was like way, way louder than my other voice in my head, who is like my
Mm-hmm.
higher version of me. And so I think like understanding that things will happen in the time, like you can't eat the cake before it's baked.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, it's kind of cool to be able to allow yourself to practice the things that are like, maybe this is a little bit uncomfortable. But the more you do it, the better you get at it, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
literally like strengthening a muscle. It's like the first time you do
Yeah.
it, you're like, oh my God. And then, you can you get used to it, right?
Yeah.
Because I know for a fact I would not be mentally ready for any of this shit if I had done it sooner. Because that's the other thing that like I think about is like, okay, now I'm 32, going to be 33. I know that this is something that I wanted
Mm-hmm.
literally 20 years ago. And but at the time, I didn't have the support to do it. I didn't have the fortitude to do it. Like, I wasn't the person that I am now. Like, it tastes
Yeah.
so much sweeter now because I know that I'm ready for it. And even getting that first gig, like, I was waiting for months thinking, where is this gig? But if I gotten it sooner, I wouldn't have been ready.
Mm-mm.
So it's nice to kind of like do the practice, get used to it. Things get, you know, you strengthen the muscle and then you're able to really like do the heavy lifting and have that like 10 moment
Yeah.
of, I'm here. I'm doing the thing.
Well, that makes me wonder, like, how are you making friends in the industry? Because the way you describe both the commercial and the music video, a friend called you. And I think as much as we want to believe people are just looking for magical people out there, we're not, because every time we need to plan something, it's like, oh shit, that's next week. Who can I call? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's whoever is top of mind, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know, but it's really who knows you.
Right.
So what actions are you taking to make more friends in the industry and find those connections and just look for collaborators?
Yeah. I think like paying attention to who you already know is a good thing. Like being able to, maybe you have friends who you don't talk about work a lot, or
Mhm.
maybe you aren't talking about your dream to them. And so my first step was really like how I had to admit it to myself and then start posting about it. The conversations I started having with people who knew me well after I started actually telling them what I wanted and actually posting about it, like they would come to me and be like, "Oh my God, I saw that stunt you did. That's so cool. Like, is this something you want to do?" Because everyone's out there just thinking about themselves. Like they're not like, "I wonder what Bethany is, processing in her mental capacity," and like, I wonder if she's ready for that." Like they're not doing that.
Yeah.
So talking about it as much as possible. I'm gonna totally botch a quote, but I think it was Tyler the Creator had said, like, I came out with my album 2 years ago. I'm still talking about it because it's still new to people. Like I'm gonna
Mhm.
keep talking about it because this is it. So keep talking about it, keep sharing with people that I know. But then I started putting myself in spaces where again I didn't feel like belonged. But through that, I was able to meet people who also felt that way or were in the space and had a different mentality about it and had other connections. And so I think the other step is like if there's a possibility to physically go where, you know, there is a version of the space that you want to be in, there's so many people and people like, at least in LA, I feel like, I know my experience, I grew up in like 20 miles outside of Los Angeles. So I've kind of grown up in Southern California, but I think like LA has this rap of people being like super flaky and all of this. That hasn't really truly been my experience. I think maybe the more people I meet, maybe, but people like want to do cool shit with you. So if
Mhm.
you have like an idea and you have the fortitude to see it through, like people want to help you. It's really kind of wild. But I have met, like, I will say, the term I use for these women is like, we all like parachuted into each other's lives at like this exact moment. So much along like the things that I've been manifesting, things that I wanted to manifest, community was such a thing that was missing. And I, you grow up, you meet different people, you know different people, and I didn't feel like I had like the community that like fully accepted me in this form yet, because I had no idea what that meant. And at one of these events, I met them, and like we have just this like incredible way of uplifting each other. We're all kind of in tangentially in motorsport or directly in motorsports, and like really just like are doing our own thing. And we all just kind of met each other at this weird moment where things just started expanding for all of us. And so I think like manifesting your community is also like something that's super important, because I think at least a lot of the times here we think about ourselves as individuals and we're like, okay, it has to come from me, I have to do the things. And maybe I'm probably projecting, because let me talk as myself, let me talk as me. Well, let me pull that back, I'll talk as myself. This is me, and I have to get it and I have to push it. But it's like I literally could not have done half the shit I've done in the past year without the support of this community. And so I'm so grateful to them. And I think like, yeah, just being able to put myself in situations where I just turn around to the person in line behind me getting coffee, it'd be like, what's up?
Yeah, you never know. You never know who is the new friend, the new person, the new next step, the new, I just love that you're doing that. And I really hope everyone listening hears that, of just tell people what you're up to. Please tell people what you want. Well, that leads me to asking you, what is something that you need or want that we can help manifest, or even just literally cause for you?
Oh, bitch. This is amazing. Oh my God, that's so powerful. God, I want to stunt drive only electric cars. That is something that I have had in my mind since last year. And I'm in that space now of being excited, because I have no idea how this is going to come to light. But being in electric cars, converting old vintage cars to electric, these are things I want to learn more about. Getting to know electric cars in the way where I could actually like do some stunts in them. All of this, like, this is something that I really like. I have this version of me that I call Bet Electric. Like, that's like, because it kind of sounds like Evil Knievel. It sounds like an old, like
It's
old
so
timey like
good.
stunt name, right?
Yeah.
So it's like Bet Electric.
I can see the merchandise already. I love it.
Right? It's like the helmet and everything. So I know that that's this iteration of myself that's coming. I have no idea how it's going to manifest, but I've already had some opportunities to get into like Formula E. And like Formula E is so sick. And if you haven't watched it, I could go on about it for years. So like we could talk offline about that. But there's so much out there in like the form of sustainability and like the tech and everything. And that is just like so interesting to me. So electric cars is something that I'm very, very curious and interested about, and want to stunt drive them. That I'm saying it out loud. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things we want. I actually had a stunt woman, Sydney Olson, on the podcast, and
Awesome.
she gave me this great tip that I've hung on to, of like, you have your to-do list, which is the stuff that you know how to take action on, and then you have your to manifest list, which is this is what I want, and I have no idea how it's going to happen.
Yes.
And I think we like the to-do list is like, we got that. We're good on that list, but like we don't talk about the to manifest list enough of, here's some crazy idea I have, who can give me one ingredient or one next step or the contact. Like, if we use our community, I had a workshop yesterday and I used Sisyphus, the guy pushing the rock up the mountain. as one picture. And then I had, and do you know that Greek story of like, it's a whole life? So I had that.
It's
and then
dark. I'm curious where it was
oh,
going. I was like, damn.
well, most people, when we think about how we create our best life, we're like, it's us up the mountain carrying it all. I'm like, and then I had a picture of like this hippie commune. I'm like, which option of life do you think is more fun and effective?
Right. Amen.
And they're so contrasted. And everyone's like, well, obviously the commune. I'm like, yeah, and you don't need to live in a commune to make your life happen, but
Correct.
ask people for help, carry the burden, let people contribute to you. Like, there's nothing that we have to do on our own, literally nothing. So if we even took 10% of what we're trying to do by ourselves and shared it with people, maybe it would happen. Maybe it happened faster, more fun.
Yeah.
Lots of options.
Exactly. And that's like the other thing. I had another friend who was like, I taught her how to drive stick. She's like, who's your dream guest for this show?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, I need to focus in on that more. Like I want to have like very different, like drag queens on my learning stick show, you know, like I just want to have like everybody on the show. And so having more guests, and she was just like, I can help you with that. And I'm just like, oh my God, okay. You know, I'm still like, someone wants to help me. What do I do? And it's like, just take one step, like just take one step in. You don't have to have the whole thing planned out. It's like, you said you wanted to help me with this, or like, this is what I need help with. Here's my one step in, like see where the path takes you.
All right. Well, I'm going to volunteer myself for learning stick with one stunt, like one easy stunt. I want to level up.
That's awesome.
Just one. Give me one that I can play with.
A little baby.
Yeah. Even if it's just a quick stop, like an ice skating stop would be really fun.
We'll just pull the e-brake and cute.
Yeah. And then you can watch my face be like, ah!
Getting used to tires screeching is funny. Because you're like, this is a good thing. You want to hear that.
Yeah. And meanwhile, your whole body's like, no.
Yeah. Mine is yes.
You know, when we ask everyone where they put themselves in the powerful lady scale, if 0 is average everyday human and 10 is the most powerful lady you can imagine, where would you put yourself today and where would you put yourself on average?
Ooh, okay. Today I'm feeling like a 7. I'm feeling like a 7. I feel like some days I can go up to an 8, some days I can go to a 6. But today it's like, I'm happy. I'm talking to you. Just posted another episode of my show. I know these things are happening. You've like given me such like great things to think about and affirmations and everything. And I really appreciate that. So yeah, I think today is a 7.
I love it. For everybody who wants to follow you, support you, hire you, work on projects together, be on your show, where can they find you and do all those things?
Okay, amazing. So my handles on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube are all Stunt with Bet, like Stunt with Bet, B-E-T. And then you can find all of that stuff on my website, which is literally beatbeatbitch.com.
So far, the best domain name we have had shared on this podcast.
Okay, good. Literally beep beep, like you're honking your horn, bitch.com.
Amazing. It says so much about you and how you are approaching this world. I love it.
Oh, thank you.
Well, it has been such a pleasure to meet you today. I'm so excited for what you're creating and how you're stepping into what just brings you total joy. And I cannot wait to see what you create this year.
God, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you saying that. And I'm so happy. I got to be here.
All the links to connect with Bet are in our show notes at thepowerfulladies.com. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening and leave us a rating and review. Come join us on Instagram at Powerful Ladies. And if you're looking to connect directly with me, please visit karaduffy.com or Kara_Duffy on Instagram. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Until then, I hope you're taking and being powerful in your life. Go be awesome and up to something you love.